Yeah.
That's what he had said.
Let's start with understanding this market, right? Before we deconstruct them, let's construct them a little bit, right? Marketing 101. You got 65 million kids, 15 and younger. That's a huge market. It right now is in challenging the 35 to 54-year-old demographic as the biggest market in the United States. By the early 2020s, Gen Z is going to be 40% of the market. If you are not engaging with them now, you are in jeopardy of never having the chance to engage with them. And that's why understanding who they are, right, and understanding what motivates and what drives them is such an essential part. But if that doesn't convince you, these numbers will convince you, right? They are responsible for direct spending of $40 billion. They influence, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, $600 billion. Tickets, apparel, devices, events, experiences. They are a huge market. They have an incredible impact on your business. And they're your next generation of sports fans. And with the competition that's out there for content, if you're not catching them, you may miss them. You may never get them. A thing to note, though, right? You heard him say about not looking at them as a monolith, and this is really important. I mean, it's been true forever. I mean, it's easy for marketers, it's easier for strategists to think, well, if I can put them in a big box, then I can address that box. For this generation particularly, it's really important that you not put them in that box, even though it's easy. You've got to see the leaves. You've got to see the branch that leaf comes off of. You've got to see the tree and the forest that is Gen Z. Know them individually because they are not defining themselves the way previous generations had in more narrow spaces. They are much more fluid in who they are and what their experiences are. And so that's one of the reasons why we're going to break them down for you today with one thing to remember. They're still kids. They're not us. They're not adults, right? Just like a caterpillar to a butterfly is a tremendous transformation, yet they came from the same thing. We as adults cannot think like we did when we were kids. Our brains have changed. And so the kids of today have more in common with the kids that you see up there on that screen than they do with you and I, because we are different, right? Our brains has changed. We have developed. And so the real difference is, for the Gen Z and the kids of today, it's not about their kiddom. It's about how they express that kiddom in this cultural moment. What is the cultural prism that refracts their childhood to give them the qualities that we associate with Gen Z? And in order to break that down, in order to deconstruct that, I've got two experts that I'd like to call to the stage. They are expert refractors of the kid world, Sarah Unger and Greg Witt. Sarah and Greg, come on out. Hey, guys.
Hey.
So let me start with some intro so you know who the experts that you have up here on the stage. Sarah Unger is the Senior Vice President of Cultural Insights and Strategy at Civic. It's part of the Seacrest Global Company. She specializes in being attuned to consumer sensitivities in an ever-changing cultural landscape. And in the world of kids, you better be ready for ever-changing. Prior to that, she was the VP of Marketing Strategy, Trends, and Insights at Viacom.
Yeah.
Even cooler.
Right? And helped build tween and teen brands, Comedy Central, MTV, and Nickelodeon. In 2015, she was named Forbes 30 Under 30 for launching Millennial and Gen Z divisions, while VP of Insights and Strategies at Ketchum. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And on the far end is Greg Witt. Greg is Executive Vice President in Youth Marketing and the Chief Cultural Strategist at Motivate. He's a proven brand builder who's helped global corporations, including Autodesk Education, Awesomeness TV, the College Board, HBO, and Walt Disney World, develop engagement strategies to connect tweens, teens, and young adults. He was recently named one of the top 5 youth marketers to follow by Inc. magazine and is the co-author of the Gen Z Frequency, which when it releases this fall is definitely going to be the go-to guidebook on understanding Gen Z. So let's dive in. Let's get meaty right away.
Let's do it.
I heard the guys up on ESPN here talking about the importance for them of authenticity and authentic engagement with their audience. And so when I go out to talk to kids all the time, they never use that word authenticity. They never use the word transparency, but they're living those values, right? They talk about all those things. What is that thing of transparency and authenticity, and why is it so important to kids?
Well, I think authenticity was always this mysterious thing we were always going for, and I guess I kind of look at authenticity like it's your story and it's your truth, and it's how you express that truth and stay true to it. But I actually feel like authenticity is just like your ticket to getting into parking your car, at the game, and then it's expected. You'd better be authentic. People can see through BS, and once you've established something truly authentic that young people or the fans care about, then you have then opened that opportunity to build trust and then get to relevance, and that's where the game starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I mean, I agree with all that. I think also, aside from it being table stakes, it's the transparency element when added to authenticity makes it for this awesome 1-2 punch where each is more impactful when in line with the other. So when you're authentic and transparent about it, makes it much easier to be authentic. So for, say, sports marketers, I think kids these days, Gen Z, it's okay to market your product. Just be forthcoming about it. You can have an agenda, just make it not hidden. Maybe they'll even like your agenda and want to co-opt you on it. But be forthcoming with it, because I think the price to pay is if you're not transparent or authentic, you will be discovered. I think, we're in this world of fake news, a lot of resources available at your fingertips. You can find information more easily than ever before. So it's like the risk of not being authentic is so extreme. Why would you not be, especially when authenticity in and of itself is a very humanizing value that can do a lot of good for you? It's just how you have to be.
It's about having an open and honest dialogue, and I think transparency is so much different based on the category, the industry, the type of brand, but also there's the transparency of explaining and telling your story of who you are and being really clear about what you are and what you stand for, what's your why. And in some cases, on one part of the spectrum, that transparency is about education and just understanding. I've literally worked with one unnamed group, but with a nonprofit, and all the tweens and teens are they're taking my money, and I was like, there was all these major problems with this particular organization. I was like, I think we need to do some content around what a nonprofit is, and it started to work, and I was like, oh, there's transparency to that too. So it's like authenticity and transparency, it's like we could have a whole session on that.
One of the things that is important to me, as picking up on that idea, is because kids are experts at that, right? Because they're seeing images from their friends, which you can't get more authentic than that, right? So when they see a brand image that's jarring, that doesn't feel right or feels like it's pushing me, as long as you're telling me I'm pushing you something, they'll get that. They'll intuitively say, oh, I'm all right with that. But when you try to snooker them on that, and try to speak their language without being them, right? They'll smell that out a mile away because they've seen 10 things, like Malcolm Gladwell in The Tipping Point in Blink talks about the intuitiveness of 10,000 hours of practice that he got from social science, right? They got a 10,000 picture rule, right? They've seen authentic pictures.
Yeah.
And so they'll sniff it right out.
Yeah, I think you have to assume that you're going through an audience that has a discerning eye, right? So if you can accept that, I think if you're putting out something that comes from a place where you can credibly play, right, then you have a great opportunity to actually engage. Just be forthcoming. If you're a business, you're trying to make money, kids are entrepreneurial. They'll probably respect that. They may even dig that. So I think you really have nothing to lose by going strong with what you're actually good at.
To pick up on your entrepreneurial thread, one of the things that I was excited about in our conversation was the connection you saw between the sports world and what's happening with kids and dynamic.
Yeah.
I know you were recently at Harvard Business School for a executive course on media, sports, and
Yeah,
content?
yeah.
What did you pull out of that made that strong connection for you to the world of sports and kids?
I mean, so many of the case studies that we went through were specific to athletes and talent and the power of superstar sports talent and how that translates to the business world. Even actually in the students who attended the course with me, a lot of them were athletes, some at the prime of their career. Lindsey Vonn, Andy Roddick, arguably not at the prime, but was in the prime. And people who are trying to translate their on-the-field experience into businesses. And it just really occurred to me, having gone through reams of Nickelodeon research on entrepreneurialism and kids having a passion point for being able to create their own businesses and translate what they love into platforms to connect with other people, how this is something that kids really admire in athletes today. That sense of entrepreneurialism that makes, athletes so interesting to kids is actually something you can lean into. Whether it's LeBron and LeBron's big moves in creating his own company back in the day, that's actually a big part of his authentic story now that kids can really tap into and relate to. So I think that sense of entrepreneurialism is something that is sort of starting to define the sports world and is a big through thread to connect to kids with.
Greg, I know you, as a 16-year-old, launched a skateboard line that became a global brand. From your interaction now with brands that are also trying to make it, are there changes or differences between the experience that you had and the way that people go about it now to be successful?
Man, you're taking it way back. When we built Good Time skateboards and then Adrenaline skateboards, it was obviously the whole landscape was different. You could, it was hard. The barrier to entry in was very, very difficult. But then, you weren't competing with what you're competing with today. So now it's really more about any young person can just connect and make a product, but it's just about capturing attention. You're just fighting for attention. I think that back then, entrepreneurialism was not so much of a thing. Now I almost feel like, once again, it's expected. Young people are assuming that they're going to have 2 or 3 different sort of career paths. One being an entrepreneur, one might be, their work, and they don't, So I think the whole entire entrepreneurial, landscape's changed. I think what hasn't changed is the need for, cultural alignment. Mm-hmm. So I think things change and things don't change. So a lot of things I've been talking about lately is just getting back to basics. Yeah. Really understanding the cultural nuances, whether it's aspects of your fan base or lifestyle, and really just getting more of a deeper connectivity within that culture, lifestyle, and then really committing to it.
You're the original athlete-preneur.
Yeah,
I think it's cool that sports, if you look at sort of the Patagonia founder's story, he was an athlete who just wanted to make better products. And I think there's an authenticity in there that's really awesome when you're sort of taking your sports business and trying to kind of tell that story to other people. Usually it comes from a place of need, and sports is I can't really think of any genre that's so passion filled. And so if often the entrepreneurialism is stemming from just a true love for the game and a desire to make a better product, that's such a credible story to come to the table with. So I think it's that kids respect that.
So who is killing it? Who, either in the sports world or outside of it, who is matching up their vision, their messaging, their engagement with Gen Z, with kids?
Oh man, Milk Cosmetics. Interestingly enough, obviously I don't wear cosmetics or anything, but I think why I say that is they just seem to connect on such a real level with just people being who they are and celebrating who they are. But the sports tie-in for me is just how when a brand really understands who they are and they can really find that authenticity and they can start telling the stories, if they become culturally aligned, then they understand how to expand, how to collaborate. And then Milk Cosmetics does these collabs with Burton, and they create these cool bags, and then they create other different types of influential partnerships. And I'm like, they're just so spot on. Who gets it? I think, to the utmost from like a media standpoint. I think complex media really kind of hits it the best. They understand their spaces. They understood how to take underserved, niches, if you will, how to bring them all together, which is cool, which wasn't being done. But more importantly, Complex just understood. They listened, and they were just culturally immersed, and understood how and where they converge. Mm-hmm. So they were able to create this much larger opportunity, not only for themselves, but for all the brands that they work with. I mean, that's the benchmark for cultural alignment. And maybe, it's not, kids focused, it's more like teen, but, it's definitely teen on up focused.
Yeah. Two brands that, I already mentioned Patagonia. I think they're awesome. Not necessarily kids focused, but I think from a family offering. I was a Patagonia kid, raised Patagonia, and I'm going to be a devotee for life. It was only when I got to really know the ethics and the morals behind the company and how they infiltrate that into everything that they do. I was just blown away by kind of the authenticity of structuring a business around a purpose. And they're marketing it in all the right ways. I will say a lot of smaller brands, I think, have increasingly, I'm discovering cooler, smaller brands thanks to like Instagram. For me, that happens to be my platform of choice of discovering new functional performance brands, sports brands. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention Nike. I just think Nike is doing such an incredible job in this space, the way they're connecting with influencers, especially geographically specific. They just won at Cannes for their amazing London video, Nike London. And I just think they have a way of kind of tapping into local culture, tapping into that vibrancy, that entrepreneurialism with their LeBron lifetime deal. And they're just spending the time to get to know the space really well. Especially with influencers. I think they're super killing it.
I recently had some conversations with folks at Nike, and it echoed some of the things I saw on the stage earlier today with the folks from SAP and the NHL at Madison Square Garden, et cetera, particularly regarding about data and kids and devices, sports devices. I was talking with an elite youth athlete, and she said that the Zepp swing tracker that she has and the Wilson X ball that gives her data feedback are some of her favorite things that she has. Like when I just asked her, apropos of nothing, so what's some of your favorite products? Those are the ones she went to. And it triggered to me one of the things that I see with kids regarding data and feedback. Why do you think that's so important to kids, and why providing that would be a way to engage with the youth market?
Kids are growing up in continual feedback loops with tech input. So I think something that to a different generation might be intimidating to have a sort of smart sports device, it's so intuitive and inherent to them. So it's an easy way to not only maximize their performance and their time invested, hold their attention in a really concrete way, especially we keep talking about how we're kind of an attention-starved economy. So I think it's really cool. It has bells and whistles that other, sports devices haven't had, but also it kind of gamifies the experience. And I think that's really, really appealing for a kids market, and ultimately probably optimizes their performance. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think just the stuff that I do with Kid Power, with UNICEF, is just around gamification of moving through different little worlds and, being a part of something bigger. When you can create purpose-driven activities that are gamified, but yeah, frankly, anything that gets people moving is a good thing.
Totally, and I love when you can add a community element into it, like Fitbit challenges. Anecdotally, doing steps challenges against kids and making sure that over the course of generations, you're all moving together actively as a community. I think it's that feedback loop offers a continual kind of engagement cycle in a way that's really interesting.
Two of the things that you both brought up that really I see reflected in kids, because it taps into that kind of, that both their human sense and their sense of optimism, of growth, and how am I going to engage with the world, is that idea of the sense of story and that extension to community, right? To being part of something larger. And sports inherently, as a team, right, is one of those things that makes you a part of something larger. It also, if I were to extend that metaphor to say, it goes on to the family, right? Because that's their first kind of piece I'm a unit in. What role does family engagement have in marketing and engaging youth culture? And is there a particular advantage or disadvantage that sports have in that realm?
First of all, sports has a huge advantage because it goes cross-generational. It's not, in this like every age it can overlap, and obviously there's life stages and different nuances based on the particular activity. But that is a huge advantage because, right off the bat you're somewhat aligned, with an interest, a particular lifestyle, an activity. I don't know, keep going. I mean, I didn't get both of those parts of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that with sports, when I think about entertainment programming and the challenges of, like, co-viewing is the ultimate goal for entertainment programming. You get parents to tune in with their kids. That would be like a win-win for Nickelodeon. But when you think about, content and shows that have done it really well, that's a special challenge. You intellectually have to write content that's not only appealing to a parent, but a kid as well. Otherwise, for the parent, it's just kind of roll your eyes. You're hearing Paw Patrol theme song for like the 100th time. Sports is, I saw some people who probably is familiar with. But sports inherently, you don't have to write two storylines. It's so innately appealing to across the generations, and I think that's one of the magic in terms of the passion point that sports contains, because it's like truly an ageless thing. And you can also kind of breed your child, grow up to engender the passions that you have, specific fandoms from birth, whether it's like putting your kids on the Green Bay Packers season tickets waiting list from the time they're born. I just think sports allows for those opportunities in a way that's so innate to the field itself.
Some of the earlier panels today were talking particularly about the past business model of sports and the huge rights fees from linear TV and the reality that that's changing and it's dynamic. And particularly with Gen Z, I have a couple of data slides that can illustrate one of the examples here. And so this is a question we ask kids 5 to 15 about having their own tablet device, right? And so you can see that there's pretty solid saturation there. If you look at the growth measure and you say, well, kids 5 to 7, it's only grown over the last 5 years 8%. That's because they used to conflate mom's tablet with their tablet, right? That number now really reflects the fact that they have their own tablet. But this is the number that's really the one that's kind of jolting and should be a wake-up call for all those who are not addressing this in the room. The reality is that this year, 2017, actually, was the first year that in the tween space, in the 8 to 11-year-old space, was the first time that the majority of kids had their own smartphone. So when they're being able to walk around with their own devices, to make their own content choices, to be engaged in whatever way they can, right? One of the things that I've enjoyed about our conversations, guys have always said to me, hey, not device, platform, right? So what are the platforms and what are the ways that the fact that this is their reality of kids, what are the platforms that are necessary to get that engagement?
What's necessary is to reach people where they are to meet your objectives in your particular industry. That changes a lot by age, interests. So what matters today? What's the $1 million question? Snapchat's really strong. Young people, they don't give a crap about what us adults are talking about in the industry, about people leaving the platform. They have, and I don't work with Snapchat or anything. I'm just saying, like, they have this kind of one-to-one, one-to-friends, one-to-many, but not in this like public setting, and so it's holding really strong. Instagram, obviously, is super, super strong. The Finsta, the fake Instagrams are probably a little bit more real. They probably have a couple different accounts. Everyone. YouTube for as far as like TV, and then soon it'll be very much more of a social network, and also some really cool things happening obviously with YouTube. But then the importance of of smaller niche platforms like Musical.ly still has a really strong audience. They just merged Lively, the live casting, and Musically. It's all being fused together, or it's done. And then there's House Party. A lot of these are smaller apps with sort of like that 10 to 30 million, ish count. I don't know, I can't snap those numbers off my head real quick, but I think the idea is just really experimenting, figuring out the roles of the channel is what's important, and really figuring out the unique voice and sort of the content styles that you need to have on those channels. And maybe more importantly, like what can you commit to and do consistently? That's just a really tricky question, right? Because it's very different for kids, because when we're marketing to kids under 13, we're all about discovering content, right? We're not like capturing data or anything, as you know well, too. But then when we start dealing with tweens and teens, differ so much by their lifestyle, their interests, or their forming, aspirations, I guess, at that tween age. Fun question, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think what you hit on right there about experimentation is really key, because for a lot of companies who aren't innately like starting, especially legacy companies who aren't from day one like building their brand on Snapchat or other platforms, that kind of a little bit of openness and experimentation really helps, especially for a younger demographic who's more, like content comes and goes, it's fleeting, it's ephemeral, especially on Snapchat. And so you can try out more things, more platforms, more chances to see what sticks. And I think especially for sports, say if you're, normally for sports engagements on linear, that's like a finite amount of time where you have a certain thing you have to show, certain points you have to hit. Other platforms give you ancillary tools to kind of like humanize your athletes, show different sides of your team. And so I think, it's important, unless you're building a sports platform specific to, or sports offering specific to a platform, no, it's not going to be your main source of revenue, but it's a great ancillary tool to drive fan engagement. And sports is all about fandom and engagement, right? And these are just engaging platforms. But as Greg said, you have to put in the time to do them. It takes up a ton of time. And so it depends. Are you an athlete who maybe wants to launch a clothing brand one day? Okay, then try to sort of start building an audience on like an Instagram that you can then monetize by linking through to the clothes yourself. You have to kind of figure out what your goals are and do it accordingly.
Yeah, I think there's one other part too that's so important about platforms that some companies kind of tend to forget about is putting as much of that content where it's relevant on your own land, like your own landing pages, and figuring out how you're utilizing, leveraging, housing, whatever it might be, that content on your own place. Because, look, it's, we only need to give so much to the people, the social platforms where it just comes and it goes and it's gone. So I'm a big fan, a big believer in different pieces of exclusive content, and it really depends on your business model, obviously, like it changes a lot, but just owned land, landing pages, websites, where you're keeping that content is important.
I want to turn to the audience, and you have a couple of Gen Z experts for some Q&A, some questions.
I do football recruiting for USC football and in LA, and by far our kids, or the guys that we're recruiting from sophomores to seniors, only use Snapchat. And you kind of mentioned it, Greg, that even that, this older generation doesn't think Snapchat's going to work anymore. It's bigger than ever with our kids, and the only time I can even, if I text them, nothing. I could text them 100 times, and then the second I Snapchat them, I get a response instantly. Yeah. Why is the appeal so big for Snapchat still, for them?
Well, we could open up a huge Pandora's box here, but...
Open it.
I mean, I'm going to open it, I mean, because everyone's playing this algorithm game, and I think the idea of being able just to send a message and then have fun with it. Yeah. I mean, I think there's the send the message part, which you could just do on WhatsApp or text, but you get to have fun with it on Snapchat. And it's just, you're not dealing with an algorithm that's just burying everybody's content. I mean, I'm a big fan of Instagram too, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, it's like, they just want to cut the BS.
And
There's-
the platform, it's
Yeah.
not intuitive to older generations. Like,
Yeah,
even
yeah, yeah.
I don't find it innately appealing. Instagram's much easier. I use Snapchat
Way
now, but it took me a while to love. I think there's that exclusivity. Your grandmother's on Facebook, your mom's on Facebook. Snapchat, that's for me.
You gotta
The
figure out
other
swipe
part of it,
codes
right?
and like what
Yeah.
you're
The
doing.
ethos that it started out with, which is just all fun and ephemeral. No pressure, right? I don't have an image that's going to be out there that I'm going to have to worry about being judged on, right? It's going to be coming and gone, and that frees me to be me. And so kids got into that, right? This is me. This is my one space, not my grandma's space, not my Instagram curated space. This is my space, you know? Well, that's not my space. We're out of time. We had a great time up here. Thank you very much. Sarah, Greg, thank you very much. Awesome.
Fun chatting.